Hello, everyone. So welcome to our next session where I'm joined by the fantastic Guy Winter. So Guy, do you want to introduce yourself to everyone, please?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for that introduction. So I'm a corporate and equity capital markets partner at Fasken. So we're an international law firm focused on the energy and natural resources sectors. So really interested in that kind of fundamental nexus between energy and, in particular, mining and minerals, which has really been emerging over the past few years. And also I serve with you, Sarah, on the OnBase's Critical Minerals Expert Committee.
Yes, and of course, during the conference, everyone's seeing rather a large number of people from that particular group in this conference, which is great. So Guy, from your perspective, obviously the title of this year's conference centers on mining's role in the just transition. And the just transition means something different to everybody. What does that actually mean for you?
Yeah, so I mean, really, I think that we're at an amazing point in history where this incredible free ride that essentially the Industrial Revolution and all economic development over the past 100 years or more has been driven by this incredible resource in the energy potential of hydrocarbons. Mm-hmm. And I think there's probably a high level of acceptance now that party is over, that the carbon that's releasing is not sustainable for the life that we want on this planet. And so really, to me, the just transition is how we manage essentially weaning ourselves off those hydrocarbons, how we introduce new technologies, new forms of energy and transport and heat. And it's important to keep all of those in mind, of course, because there can be a real overemphasis on power generation in terms of what transition means, but also making sure that in turn is done in a way that is fair to all of the stakeholders, of course, to the environment, but there are also enormous social implications in terms of the transition that we're going through. And so I think in terms of mining and minerals role, on one level, the sheer volume of material, of primary material that is required to make that happen absolutely dwarfs the amount that we've dedicated to energy generation and transport in the past. We've been able to unlock that amazing energy from the hydrocarbons. And you frankly can't replace that without a huge amount of primary materials. So that's how I see it, and I think it's actually a huge opportunity for the mining and minerals sector to embrace that role. I think in the past there've been misunderstandings about the extractive industries, and I think the extractive industries themselves have contributed to those misunderstandings. So this is a time when the world needs those sectors, and I think those sectors need to adapt to what the world needs from it. So for all of us, I think it's a really exciting time to be involved in the sector.
It certainly is. It certainly is. So with regards to that adaptation, Guy, do you think that we are actually seeing that adaptation happen? And if so, do you think that it's happening fast enough?
Well, I mean, I think probably the focus when you talk about transition is that it's not a kind of revolution, and so it is a process. I think we all probably would like to see quicker progress being made, and everyone will have their own view on the contribution that various governments have made to it. I mean, I prefer to focus on some of the positives. I think it's incredible to see in the power generation sector, it's really wonderful what's been achieved. I think the offshore wind sector is one that the UK is justly proud of. And I think, I think it's points away to how we can possibly achieve more wins for a just transition in other sectors. So I think the offshore wind has essentially created financing models that have enabled very large scale capital investment, actually at quite a reasonable cost to the taxpayer, to the extent that during the periods of high energy prices that we had, well, over the past few months and winter, the incentive structures that were put in place through contracts for difference have actually been returning a significant amount to the UK taxpayer. And that's a phenomenal achievement when you consider that people were saying that type of transition would never be affordable. And yet, not only has it proved affordable, and there are foundations for further development, but it's actually returning money to the Treasury. So, that's a huge win. I think a lot of the thinking that has been done in terms of electric vehicle adoption, is encouraging. I think there are areas like the transition of heating away from natural gas that are still immensely challenging. And so, but we do have some of these structures, some of these ways of thinking now, which hopefully point the way to transition there too.
So if we take what you've just kind of touched on there with regards to the offshore wind and I guess the financing mechanisms in place from that or for that, is there anything that we can learn and perhaps adopt across in the mining space to try and kickstart some of the minerals exploration, mining, etc., and provision? Because of course we need a huge volume of materials to be able to build the wind turbines, etc., of the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. One aspect which it is different in terms of the critical minerals that we need today is the complexity and length of the supply chains that exist. It's just a reality that the critical minerals that we need don't necessarily occur in the UK. In some cases, they may. They may occur and not be capable of economic extraction, depending on how you look at the parameters for evaluating that. And even if they do exist, there may not be the infrastructure to process them. There may not be the support industries in order to actually produce that very, very high quality product that you need if you're going to put it into an electric vehicle motor or a wind turbine. And so it's those complex supply chains that I think require the most careful consideration, because if any key part of them is neglected, then you're not going to achieve ultimately that sort of positive impact on transition that you're looking for. Well, what I think that we've learned from experiences like offshore wind, and I would also say from the energy from waste sector, which has been an area which is kind of characterized by very complex process engineering that cannot be achieved overnight. It is just the model for government intervention to maximize the private sector investment. So where you have offshore wind, people seriously questioned whether that could ever be economically viable, because it required the cost to come down very significantly, but it also required the security of pricing to give you that impetus. And so there, the contract for difference model was developed, not as a handout, but rather as a way to create a stable market to sell power into. And the one real innovation was the creation of the Green Investment Bank as well, which was really specifically designed to attract matching funding from private sector participants. It was phenomenally successful in doing that from some of the largest financial institutions in the world. And ultimately, the Green Investment Bank itself, and again, we could argue about the price for that sale, but was sold to Macquarie and realized a significant return for the taxpayer. So it's an example of a way that you start out with an objective, with regulatory drivers, with transition of power generation as your objective, and find those ways to intervene, but in a way that doesn't leave the taxpayer holding a massive bill.
Mm-hmm.
Energy from waste, there were some really interesting projects where effectively the projects wouldn't have been funded because they had the initial equity from the developer. They weren't ready to raise debt from lending banks, but they were able to find mezzanine investment from essentially funds which were set up with the support of the Green Investment Bank, and then had matching funding from private sector, private equity investors. So again, really small targeted investments by the taxpayer. And I say investments because they weren't grants, they were investments. Mm-hmm. And pardon me, they unlocked a sector that now has developed in a kind of free market way without the need for continued intervention.
And so is that something, I mean, in terms of things like energy from waste, offshore wind, etc., I guess the clear value proposition to the taxpayer is quite clear, because it's almost like, you can see it, you can feel it, you can almost touch it. From a mining perspective, because the value chain is so long and perhaps even more complicated than what we're talking about there, do you think that the same kind of interventions will work, or do you think they require something slightly different to actually show that value proposition to the taxpayer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good challenge, and I think that one has to consider the parts in the supply chain which need that support, and maybe that are appropriate to be provided with that kind of support. It's perhaps hard to say that when you consider upstream mining, that's obviously a very high risk process, and we all know that the return from investment in drilling and exploration activities can be variable, to say the least. But I think what's interesting about the critical minerals sector, though, is that it forms part of this. We need to see it as part of the end result, which may be the automotive sector, it may be the renewable energy sector, in terms of ensuring that we're able to fabricate wind turbines here in the UK.
Yeah.
And so it's looking at the parts of the supply chain that most need that support. Sorry, Sarah.
Okay.
But I think that some of the most interesting areas are, for example, the processing. So rare earths is always the classic example that people come back to, but it's not the only example. There are many other, like lithium would be another example of a metal where it requires a lot of processing from the primary material.
Yeah.
And so these are areas where one of the big challenges is the fact that there simply doesn't exist the processing infrastructure outside China. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at the kind of, you can look at any number of pie charts and bar charts to show you, the massive domination of processing in those sectors. And so I think it's if you wish to develop new technologies, and especially to come back to your point about the just transition, in a way that delivers the environmental and ESG outcomes that we're looking for, you do need to have new technologies, and those new technologies in a sort of complex process are just not bankable standing, in a completely free market. Mm-hmm. So I would love to see that kind of targeted support that we saw for energy from waste, for example, supporting British industry in those very sort of value-added high-end processes, and working closely with our universities where amazing technologies are developed. But we all know that particularly in the automotive industry, you've got such a long lead time between even something that may work in the lab to actually putting metals into a car. So
yeah. So with that then, Guy, do you think that rather than take the British example here and say, okay, so the British context is different compared to any other country on the world, etc. You know, we're a little island. Whilst we do have some domestic mining, it is limited in part because we're a small island, so we don't have the volume that's there. In terms of that potential intervention, investment or mechanism, actually then focusing in on the processing parts, and therefore in terms of going into the actual extractives bit, the onus is then on that processing company to ensure that what the materials that they are sourcing come from a responsible mining company wherever it might be in the world. So it's almost a case of you've got that kind of indirect just transition that's being pushed upstream with regards to that. Is that a correct reflection of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think, clearly it's really important that the provenance of that material is properly managed. And I think one area where it would be fantastic to see the UK and, dare I say it, our kind of European partners taking a lead, it is in terms of setting those kind of uniform standards that can then ensure that the mining activities and processing that takes place outside is in accordance with the expectations that consumers have and that are necessary for a just transition. Mm-hmm. So I think, there's a level of integration in that sense. What's interesting, of course, is that increasingly you're seeing the kind of ultra volatility that exists in the commodities markets, causing people to look at very fully integrated models. And so if you look at, you'd always take these kind of comments with a pinch of salt, but some of Elon Musk's comments about lithium mining, which is certainly as tough as any to tackle. But, we obviously have seen numerous examples of the OEMs actually reaching out for direct offtake contracts with producers. And so, all of that, though, has had a bit of a knock-on effect. If you see what happened with nickel recently. And, really that's been very challenging because we've seen the kind of LME's nickel market very, very challenged by a number of factors in terms of extraordinary demand side issues, clearly speculation, and fundamentally a shortage of physical delivery. So, these are very distorted markets at the moment. And that's why I think trying to put some kind of shape on it and to look for ways that we can create a kind of stable supply chain that works for everyone. It's a great challenge and a great opportunity at the moment.
So stability in the supply chain with regards to commodities. This sounds like a holy grail that we've got here, Guy. Do you have any tricks as to, beyond what we've just discussed, where that might be able to become a reality? So where we stop the fluctuations that we do see and that variability to such large extents?
Well, I mean, I think sadly, we're obviously in for a longer period of volatility because, I mean, partly, we're talking about transition. And so these are, if you look at the spike in demand for nickel, lithium, cobalt, people predicted this, but that's very different to the lead time for mining these resources is so long that that's very different to effectively planning for it. Mm-hmm. And so I think, talking about the kind of issues in the nickel market, we've seen issues, high profile issues with lithium carbonate as well. Very, very significant, 250% increase in 7 months. I mean, that is incredibly difficult for people to plan for, really difficult for people to hedge against. And so I think part of it is going to be a recognition that mining does have this crucial part to play. And so it's going to take a while to bring more mines online to supply these resources. But it's something that has to happen, and the industry has to win those hearts and minds to give it that license to develop them.
And so with that, just to then loop all the way back into that just transition perspective, Guy, from your perspective, what does mining need to be doing better in order to be able to win those hearts and minds?
I mean, I think it would be really helpful to articulate the role of materials in energy transition. And I think if you actually look at the energy companies, I think they have been, again, people will have different perspectives on this, but I think they've been quite effective in recent times in articulating how transition works in terms of how the company could evolve from essentially sourcing and a completely integrated supply chain for hydrocarbons to how the role that they have to play in energy transition. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe they found it easier because they form part of, people understand the concept that it's an energy company. Yeah. I think that mining can present itself much more effectively as part of the renewable energy and the energy transition supply chain. There's a kind of educational message, because I still think that there's a sort of atavistic response to extractive industries as despoiling the earth. Mm-hmm. And yet, people may be happy to have that conversation about it on a cell phone, that we know the minerals have clearly been mined. So it's just sort of maybe drawing out that sort of role in a way that hopefully the discussions this week are playing a part of. Also the circular economy, I think what we've seen is only just the tip of the iceberg of resource recovery and reuse. And I think if we can see that level of commitment, if people can think of mining companies and mineral companies and suppliers as using more and forming part of the recycling and reuse solutions, then I think, again, recycling is a concept that people can access easily. It's something that we all do. We have our different bins. I think we get that. And I think it's something that the industry can be much more identified with. And if you think of, there's some really great recent examples of UK companies who have not only been involved in the kind of upstream mining activity. So we're so environmentally friendly here that our lights go out. Like if you just sit still for a second, our lights go out. So. But I think if people, as part of articulating where that material comes from, you are showing a closed loop and showing more of that material coming back, it all adds up to a different picture from the one that sometimes people may have of the sector. Yeah, exactly. So it's almost that kind of respect and stewardship for the materials themselves. So yeah. Brilliant. Well, Guy, I think the lights were giving us a hint with regards to that. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Absolutely brilliant. And we really welcome your input to our conversation. So thank you very much, Guy.